Kimberly Neucall is a woman who had to walk through many ups and downs in life. Through her journey, she has had to learn many lessons and let go of past hurt and disappointment to find true peace. An avid traveler, she has met many people with similar experiences and realized there is nothing new under the sun. Whether climbing heights in Yellowstone, snorkeling in Brazil, or sitting at home with a cup of coffee, with a cup of tea, she embraces life to the fullest. She desires that others will find peace and fulfillment and the courage to find their true identity in Christ as well. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's a pleasure to have Kimberly Neucall on the show. Welcome on the show, Kimberly.
Thank you so much for having me, Peter. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to have you featured on P English Literature. I'm excited as well.
I was looking at your books on Amazon, and I was kind of excited because a couple of your books and a couple of my books, they kind of cross over a little bit with the same topic.
Wow, wow, that's quite brilliant to know. That makes me blush. Oh, that's quite amazing to know. That's quite amazing. Now, Kimberly, I would like to first say that you have amazing books with interesting and compelling titles. Now, I would love to start with Quest for Peace, Finding Freedom in Forgiveness. How does this book come about? What inspired you to write Quest for Peace?
Well, that was a personal journey that I had to walk through.
Hmm.
I had a lot of stuff happen in my past, and I held a lot of that unforgiveness in my heart. And I grew up in the church, and people would always say, "Oh, turn the other cheek, forgive and forget." If you're kind to them, it's like keeping burning coals on their head. Or
Hmm.
vengeance is mine, I'll repay, says the Lord. You have to live at peace with everybody. And it just didn't sit well with me because I could not let it go. And as a result, it started affecting my health. I
Oh.
would get high blood pressure, I would get headaches. And I realized I've got to figure out what the Bible really says about forgiveness, not what
Hmm.
everybody was just telling me to be a good girl and let it go, but what did the Bible really say? And that's how this book came about. This is it here.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
yeah, I started going through all of those verses I had always heard about forgiveness.
Hmm.
And I started looking at them in context. And then I started discovering that verses sometimes contradicted each other,
Absolutely.
and it was like, well, what does that mean? It means the truth is there, but it's situational. You know,
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
one of those things that in this situation,
Mm,
you need to live at peace with people, but in
mm,
this situation, you can walk away. But the
absolutely.
the one truth that was constant was that you do have to forgive.
Mm,
And so when I was doing my research, I came across this quote. It was on Greater Good on a Berkeley site. And it says psychologists generally define forgiveness as a conscious, deliberate decision to release feelings or resentment or vengeance
mm,
towards a person or group who has harmed you,
mm,
regardless of whether they actually deserve your forgiveness.
mm,
And I had heard people say unforgiveness is like drinking a poison and hoping it kills the other person because it does affect our health, but it doesn't really affect the person we're mad at.
mm,
It destroys us. And so I had to learn how to release all of that. And so I dug into the Bible, and this is my journey. And then as I started talking to people about what I was learning about the different passages, people started sharing their stories with me.
mm,
And with permission, names have been changed in the book. Obviously, situations have been slightly altered to protect the, as I put it, the not so innocent. But the people who have released forgiveness, they had to learn how to release forgiveness themselves. So
mm,
I realized, oh, we're all in this together. And I did that study for me. but then I was encouraged to put it out there for others. And so that's how that book came about.
Wow. Well, I'm amazed with the sound of your book. It sounds very interesting. And knowing the fact that in the Bible sometimes some chapters and passages contradict each other. At some point you are told to act. Another part you are trained to be calm and be a bit quiet. At some other part you are told to do this, and the other part you are told to do the contradictory, the opposite of that thing. So it's more like it's a kind of like you said, it's situational, something that needs to be balanced, need to be applied at certain point in time. Yeah, so that's quite amazing to know, and I'm quite excited to hear that from you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's funny because what really always got me was, take care of the poor, those that, give them food and support them. And
Mm.
then, but there's another verse in the Bible that Paul, the same person who says, hey, take care of the widows and the orphans, he also says, hey, if you don't work, you don't eat.
Be true.
So it's like, okay, those are two very clear directives that completely
Mm,
contradict each other. And,
mm,
and verses on forgiveness were the same way. And so that's what you
absolutely.
learn. The truth is you have to forgive.
Mm,
God forgave us, we have to forgive. But
absolutely.
you don't have to restore relationship, or sometimes you can restore relationship, just like you do help those that cannot help themselves.
Mm,
But if you're capable, then go get a job. So,
absolutely.
but there is that compassion is a truth.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is a truth, and that's what you need to focus on, not the to-do list. So
Yeah.
that's religion, and I don't like religion. I like relationship. So
Mm. Wow, that's quite amazing. That's quite intriguing to know. And I also see that you have another book titled Be a Solutionary that's turned those dreams into reality. For readers who haven't read the book yet, and without giving much information away, could we have a sneak of what we'd expect picking up Be a Solutionary?
absolutely. So this book, I don't even have a copy that doesn't have this not for sale band on it yet. That's
Oh.
how new this book is. It just came out. And it is literally a guide, a step-by-step generalized guide to take a dream that you have and make it reality.
Mm,
So it takes you through writing down your dreams and turning it into a goal, taking a goal and turning it into a plan to reach that goal, and then taking action steps until it finally becomes reality.
mm,
When I was a little girl, I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be able to make a living. I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it. This is part of
yeah.
I'm living this too. And
Mm,
but it was one of those things that until I started working with a coach, a writing coach, I didn't realize to you had to write it down. And then and her program, Sue Sundstrom, absolutely amazing woman, amazing program. You can find her online. And
mm,
she walked us through it, and her program was, you will have a book written in 6 months. And I did that. That's how I got my first book published, and she
mm,
helps you with the publishing process. But it was one of those things that I also learned you had to give yourself some grace. You can set your goals, and then life happens, and you
mm.
need to take a step back and say, okay, my mom had gotten sick while I was writing my first book,
Oh,
and I had to step back and take a month and two off. So
absolutely.
it took me 8 months to get it out there. But I
Mm,
didn't stop and beat myself up saying, oh, I'm a failure because I didn't hit my deadline.
mm,
No, life happened. There was grace for myself to say, okay, I just have to push that back a little bit. And instead of 6 months, I'm going to have it published in 8. And so this book kind of Be a Solutionary. It's taking solution and visionary and kind of putting the words together. You
mm,
dream it, and then you come up with the way to achieve it. And there's a couple of different paths that you can take to do that, and I outline them in the book. I kind of it's really a booklet. It's only about 50 pages total,
Oh,
but it's very direct. It's here are the steps, do it. So
wow.
I can't hold your hand, I can't do it for you. You have to make that decision to do it yourself first and become your own solutionary. You can't rely
Mm,
on luck, you can't rely on hitting the lottery or anything like that. It's doable, and most people just don't realize how simple it is when you break it down. So
mm.
that's the book.
Wow, I love the sound of that as well. Your books actually do sound very intriguing, very amazing. Now, I'd love to ask you, Kimberly, as authors, we all have different ways of reacting to feedbacks and criticism of our works. I'm curious to know your opinion about criticism. How do you react to negative criticism of your books if you've ever had one in time past?
Well, I have a really strong group of friends around me, and they are not afraid to tell me exactly what they think about my books.
Beautiful. Wow.
And so it's there are times when they will question something. They'll say, "Hey," or they'll ask me to expound on something, or they'll be like, "You probably shouldn't put that in there." And I'm thinking, "Oh, that was like a really good point, but with the way you're looking at it, I totally understand how it can go the wrong way and be
Okay.
offensive or just be wrong, because as we all learn, I mean, we're human, we all make mistakes.
Absolutely.
And so I didn't, when I was younger, you couldn't tell me I was wrong. And now I'm like, oh yeah, my bad. So I try to react well to it. I
Mm,
understand that not everybody is going to like my subject matter. They're not going to like my books. They're going to think, oh, that didn't work for me,
mm,
and that's fine, because it there is no cookie cutter way for anybody. If you're walking through forgiveness, I'm going to ask you some hard questions in the book. You may not
mm,
like them, or you may say this is not
mm,
relevant, and
mm.
that's totally up to you. Um,
Yeah.
I try to make sure I know who my audience is, so that I'm writing to them. I'm not
Mm.
writing to 8 billion people in the world. I'm writing to a small group of people, and each book is slightly different.
Oh.
Forgiveness is those that need to forgive people and they don't know how to do it,
Mm,
and may have grown up in the church with some wrong thinking.
mm,
Be a solutionary is for those who may want to be entrepreneurs. They may want to be writers. They may want to be artists. They may want to start their own businesses. They may want to just know how to survive, and maybe their dream isn't to make a lot of money, but it's to just be able to sit in the back and watch the birds. You know, that
mm.
it's a more generalized, but again, it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
And so, I always consider who my audience is, and where the criticism is coming from as well.
Oh, that's quite beautiful. I'm quite excited and quite great to know that you consider your audience and know where the criticism is coming from, which I think is very important and necessary in terms of writing. Now, you also have another one that I found the title very captivating and quite enthralling, which is 365 Days to Fear Not. Could you tell us a bit about 365 Days to Fear Not?
Yes, that book. Now I'm holding it up because that book
Mm,
is got some meat to it. It's a
wow.
very thick, big book.
Voluminous. Wow.
Yes. And this was born out of the health crisis that we had, the global health crisis. Um, During that time, everything, I'm in the United States, everything was locking down, shutting down.
Yeah.
People were getting sick, they were dying.
Hmm.
And my mom was diagnosed with cancer,
Wow.
and in the middle of all that, and she had to have a stem cell transplant. And she then, right after the transplant, she got COVID and she got sick.
Wow.
And I was terrified because I was 2,000 miles away. I couldn't get home because of restrictions.
Absolutely.
She was
Wow.
in the hospital. I couldn't even visit her even if I was home.
Wow.
And I didn't know what was going to happen. And I had always heard the Bible says 365 times to fear not. I think God means it. And I was very afraid. I was afraid of losing my mom. I didn't know what end was that, but I thought I need to read those verses. Well, I started searching for them and they don't exist. There's not 365 verses that tell you to fear not. There's only about 160 of them.
Wow.
170 depending on what translations you look at.
Yeah.
So I started just looking at every verse that had the word fear in it, because there were over 500 verses with the word fear. And I discovered that the Bible would say, when I am afraid, this is what you do. And I thought, well, the Bible says fear not, but it also says, hey, you're going to have fear. And when you do, this is how you handle it. And then I was reading about the fear of the Lord. And I got struck by, I was in the Psalms and it was like fear of the Lord, fear of the Lord, fear of the Lord. And that means to put him in awe and in reverence, to put him on the throne, put him where he belongs, and you stay where you belong. But I noticed that the fear of the Lord came with a promise. Fear the Lord and you will be esteemed at the gates. Fear the Lord, it will go well with you in the land.
Absolutely.
Well, the Lord, and your harvest will be great.
Absolutely.
And then I realized that if you fear the Lord, his promises take care of all the other fears. If you fear man, if you put your eyes on God and fear the Lord, you're esteemed, you're raised up. He holds you up.
Yeah.
And you don't have to fear man. If you fear lack, not having enough, or sickness or death, if you fear the Lord, he's got your back.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my goodness. So this book is actually, I mean, I've got tons and tons of notes, but when you get into this book, you'll notice the pages are just blank. Because all I did is I put the verse, I give you a place to write it out or summarize it. I ask you a few questions about it, like read the verses before and after. What's the story? How does this verse apply to your situation? How can you deal with it in the future? What promises can you claim? Is there anything else standing out to you? Because I could tell you everything I learned by reading these verses, but it's going to be different for everybody else.
Sure.
And then at the bottom, you write your own prayer to God.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? That's what I did. It took me a long time to get through all those verses.
Wow.
But it gave me such a peace. And for the record, my mom is in full remission. She is healthy. She has no lingering effects from the cancer.
Wow.
And she's living her best life right now. She's retired. Awesome.
Wow.
So yeah, but there was so much that I couldn't control. So I did that to see what God had to say to me and how I could get through it. So yeah, now when I do have fear, it's like, okay, I've got verses. When I'm afraid, do this, look to God. Take your eyes off of this. Don't look at the problem. Look at the solution. And
Absolutely.
that's God. So
wow, that's quite inspiring. I love your description. I love everything you've mentioned so far. And the stories in between your narration, they're quite inspiring. They're quite really inspiring and communicating hope amidst turbulence. That's great. I'm also curious to know if you experienced any challenges while writing your book. If there is any, could you share with us what challenge it is and how you ultimately overcame it?
I think the hardest thing for me, because I do work full time, I have a day job. So part of the challenge is that making time to research the topic and making sure that I'm not writing just to write and get something out there. Everything that I write, I'm trying to grow from and learn from. None of these books started out as, oh, I'm gonna be a best-selling author and I'm gonna write all of
Mm.
these books. When I was a kid, I actually wanted to write fiction.
Wow.
And I do have some fiction books that I'm working on, but they're like so hard. And I'm like,
Mm.
so I'm a researcher, is my job. And so these books I can research and I'm like, oh, this kind of is in my wheelhouse. But it is hard at times to make the time to write because I'm in front of the computer all day. And when I get home, I don't want to be in front of the computer all night. So it's that, and it's keeping in mind who my audience is and what the purpose is.
Oh, wow.
So I'd say those are probably my biggest challenges because I'm an artist as well. This is some of my artwork behind me. And
Oh, beautiful.
yeah, and I would love to be painting and not doing housework. My old roommates from college, they'll be like, she's such a slob. They're right. I am still. But it's finding that balance too between working and taking care of the house and writing and making sure that I'm writing well.
Wow.
So
That's quite amazing. I love everything you mentioned and the challenges and how you ultimately overcame it really sounds quite inspiring. Now, Kimberly, you also have another book titled From Writing to Flourishing in the Workspace. Without giving much information away, could you tell us a bit about what inspired you to write From Writing to Flourishing in the Workplace?
yeah, it's actually wilting to flourishing. From wilting to flourishing, wilting being the word that means you're going down, and flourishing, blossoming.
Mm,
And
absolutely.
it's one of those books that so in my past life, I used to go into businesses and help fix them. And um, I had grown up in the church and I would go into businesses, and the person that walked into the business was not me. I was not nice. I was very mean, and I was very task oriented. I would walk in and say, here are all your problems. This is who we're going to fire. This is how we're going to fix it. This is who we're going to cut. And I was just very direct. I didn't really care about the people. I had a job.
Oh,
Okay. And I walked into one place. I was hired in one place, and my best friend happened to be working there. And within like a week, she pulls me aside and she says, who are you? And I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, you're mean. You're not nice at all. And this is not you. I know the real you. Who
wow.
are you? And I thought, oh my goodness, my best friend doesn't like me
Wow.
as a businesswoman. And I was like, and I was just wilting and dying inside. You want to talk about criticism? There you go, right in my face. And I was
Wow.
like, okay. And so I started thinking because she knew me from church and I was very active in my church. I would work at the mission, I would work with the kids. I was always out there. And I started thinking, well, how do I apply what I've learned in church to the
Workplace.
workplace? Because and I started listening to sermons again, and I'm like, they always tell you how to use your gifts, your talents, compassion, mercy, grace in the church, but they never give you real world examples of how to apply it in the workplace.
Hmm.
And I said, you know what? God talked a lot about money. He had a lot of parables. Let me start looking at it and start figuring out how to apply it.
Hmm.
And it did. It changed the way I worked in businesses because I learned, okay, these are real people with real lives, and maybe they don't know what they're doing. And so I started learning how to apply grace, how to apply mercy, how to apply compassion in the workplace as well as integrity and honor, and not just focusing on the bottom line. The
Hmm.
bottom line is important. Any business owner will tell you they have to make money,
Absolutely.
but you don't make money at the expense of your people.
Hmm. Wow.
And so I really dug into some of the parables, some of the religious concepts of grace and mercy. And I'm like, how would you apply? And I actually took, and again, I started talking to a bunch of people in different places of work, and I'm like, how do you apply grace? How do you apply mercy? How do you apply compassion
Mm.
and still manage the bottom line?
Wow.
And and I learned a lot. And then I stumbled across the parable of the talents, and it really jumped out at me from a workplace situation, because
Mm.
somebody was like, how do you handle write-ups when you have to write up somebody? And I'm like, the parable of the talents is perfect for that. It
Mm.
says that there was a wealthy merchant who was going away, and he called his servants, and he gave one 5 talents,
Five,
one 2 talents, and
two,
one 1 talent,
one.
according to their abilities,
Yeah.
which means he had evaluated them. He
Mm.
knew what they were capable of.
Absolutely.
And so some got more and some got less. And then when he came back, hey, I doubled the 10 to 10. I doubled to 4. I buried it in the ground.
Mm.
And he goes through and he says, you knew my expectations. And then he fired the third guy and he promoted the other two. And I'm like, this is a classic workplace example. You can evaluate people.
Mm.
You can, as long as you let them know what you expect.
Yeah.
According to their abilities, he expected that the guy who got 1 talent would do something with it and he would get a return on his investment. He
Mm.
expected that. And the guy didn't even live up to that minor expectation of putting it in the bank to get
Wow.
some interest. And
Wow.
so it's like the Bible is full of stories like that. And I just grabbed a few of them and compiled them. And here is the book, From Wilting to
Wow.
Flourishing in the Workplace. This way.
Beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful.
So, and so yeah, it's one of those things that, again, it came out of my own experience when somebody criticized me and said, you are not the same person in church that you are in work, and that needs to fix.
Mm.
And I went,
Wow.
you're right, it does. So yeah.
Wow. That sounds very deep. And it's quite nice to know about the inspiration, how it came to be, which sounds quite intriguing to me. Now, Kimberly, apart from the books you've mentioned so far, do you have any other works you've authored or currently working on?
I don't have anything else published yet, but I do have my next book in the works. I am working on a book of hope.
Hmm.
And I'm going through the Bible and I'm pulling out stories of hope. I'm pulling out word studies on the word hope. And I'm hoping to have that released by December. And it'll be very similar to 365 Days to Fear Not.
Wow.
So,
Wow, that's quite great. I look forward to that, and hopefully, once that is up, it'll be great to have you back on the show. Now, is there anything that you'd love to share with the viewers about your books that we didn't mention in this interview, and you'd love the viewers to know?
I'm sure all of my books are available on Amazon.com. You can also go to my website, KimberlyNeucall.com, and there are links to all of the books. So if you click on the book cover, it will take you actually to Amazon to purchase it. My artwork is also available. You can order prints. The prints, I believe, are restricted to North America at the moment. I'm working on that. But they, I do have clicks, but Amazon, my books have been made available in all markets. So, and they are print on demand. So when you purchase it, they usually come pretty quickly.
That's great. That's quite amazing. And I did left a link in the description part of this interview where viewers can get a copy directly from Amazon. So, Kimberly, I also love to ask you, do you have any advice for other writers who are struggling with publishing a book? What would you tell people in this category?
Absolutely. First of all, keep going. You talk to the majority of people and they all have a book in them. Everybody seems
Mm.
to, but only about 5% of the people are going to publish a book.
Mm.
When I first started out, it was, you had to go to a publisher and get an agent, and and get a lot of rejection letters. And you want to be humbled, go that route. But I I found working with a coach, if you can find a writing coach, somebody who can spur you along, who has gone before you, that is awesome. I use Sue Sundstrom. Locally, I am helping a couple of girls in my church just with some advice. Some younger kids, get their books out on Amazon.
Mm,
Um, Amazon has opened up a world for people to do independent publishing.
absolutely.
And it's not hard, it's not difficult. um, I highly recommend, though, make sure you're putting out a good product. Don't put out something with a lot of spelling or typos or things
Yes.
like that. Work with somebody who can do editing, work with somebody who can do formatting. I go out to Fiverr all the time and use people out on Fiverr to format my books. I'm an artist, so I do my own book cover design.
Oh,
Um,
beautiful.
and so I can do all of that. I have the
Wow.
program to do that. But formatting the book, the interior of the book, never. I'm terrible at it, so I pay somebody to do it. But it doesn't cost a lot. It really doesn't cost a lot anymore, and you can get your books out there. And so my advice is don't stop, keep going. It is
Mm,
possible to get your books out there in the world.
yeah.
So this is a dream of mine finally come true, and I
Wow.
encourage everybody to do the same.
Wow, that's great. Thank you so much for your advice. I'm hopeful that viewers, including myself, would love to utilize it. So thank you so much, Kimberly, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. It's a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And to all of your listeners, I've really enjoyed. I've watched some of your interviews and I've really enjoyed them. So I love that you go out there and you are helping authors promote themselves. That is so needed.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I appreciate that as well.